Welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats podcast, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Mollie, it's been a while. Jake Brown, Mollie Walker here, Larry Brooks of the New York Post will join us in just a second. What has it been, 5 weeks, Mollie? Your hair's changed to curly. Both of us look tan as hell, like we've got some time in the sun in. How's I guess the break been? There's not been a lot of news, but finally we do have some news.
Yeah, it was definitely a lengthy coaching search. Chris Drury was not mincing words when he said he was going to take his time and really do a diligent vetting process, and that's exactly what we got. But I mean, that's kind of a trademark of Chris Drury, so it's not really unexpected. But yeah, it was just a bit of a waiting game every day, trying to find out who they're leaning towards, who they're talking to. It wasn't the most robust search, but that was obviously a testament to who was available at this summer. But it was quite a ride. So we've landed on Peter Laviolette. So I'm kind of just happy that it's over and ready to do the draft and then have a bit of a summer before the season starts.
18 full seasons, parts of 3. He's won a Stanley Cup. Unfortunately, his last year coaching the Capitals. First year they missed the playoffs and almost a decade. From all I'm seeing from Ranger fans, Mollie, people are pissed off and they're saying same old Rangers and this is the same thing all over again. I haven't seen one positive Rangers fan. We'll start with your reaction, get something from Harts before Larry pops on. What do you think of that? And what do you think of the hire?
I understand it more than most. I really, really understand why Ranger fans aren't happy, why this seems like a bit of a, not a bit of a, it is a recycle. Peter Laviolette is a known entity. There is no unknown about him. Everybody knows where he's been, his track record and things like that. I understand the disappointment. I do. But if you look at the big picture of things, what was available, the fact that they could not move forward with Gerard Gallant. Look, once you get that impression from the players that the coaches lost the room, they don't want to play for him anymore, no matter what, somebody else is going to be a better option. And I have seen the argument of why did we let Gerard Gallant go? And it's all valid. It totally is. I don't think Gerard Gallant necessarily did anything worth getting fired for. He had back-to-back 100-plus point seasons, 2 playoff appearances, 1 conference final finish. And yes, this last season was a colossal disappointment in every way, shape, or form. But the track record wasn't necessarily worthy of getting let go. That being said, obviously the exit interviews indicated something else, and that is the most important thing. So no matter what, that was the right decision because they could, what are they going to do? 5, 6, 7 games into the season, they're 0-3 and whatever. And you fire the coach mid-season, that would be worse probably than having to go through this process this summer, even though it was such a shallow pool of candidates. Peter Laviolette was the favorite from the very beginning, from the moment the Capitals let him go in mid-April, and then Gerard Gallant was let go. Peter Laviolette, on paper, is hands down the most qualified person for this job. And I think that that's honestly all Ranger fans should be trying to harp on. He's led 3 different teams to the Stanley Cup final, won it once. And yes, I understand he hasn't had a lot of recent playoff success. I can say that I know that the Rangers looked at his stint in Washington, as disappointing as it was, they think that it was because of the injuries that piled up there, which also makes sense. But yeah, his last go around was not encouraging, not inspiring. So I understand the disappointment, but if you look at his body of work, try to focus on that a little bit more. This is an established guy. He's worked with a lot of different talented players, a lot of different teams with a lot of different personalities, and he's shown that he can take several different clubs to the final. And I think that that's something that everybody should try to harp on. I get it. It's not sexy. There's nothing sexy about it, but I think it is the best case scenario considering the circumstances that the Rangers were under this offseason.
Yeah, he's the 4th coach to take 3 different teams to Stanley Cup finals. He's working his way around the Eastern Conference. Andrew Harts, before Brooksy pops on as a big Ranger fan. What is your reaction? Are you underwhelmed by this?
Underwhelmed is probably the best way to put it. But the problem, it's like Molly said, there really wasn't anybody else out there. I mean, I was curious to see if they would go along the likes of Joel Quenneville. But again, someone who's embattled with controversy. Did the Rangers
Mhm.
really want to take on that PR hit? I don't think they did.
Did
Uh,
Quenneville want to take on
that
that
too.
spotlight after everything that he's been through? The answer is no. Same with
Right.
Mike Babcock. Why would they want to, after everything that they've been through, why would they want to come here and have us all, rip the organization, rip the hire? It's just too big of a stage. I get why that didn't happen as well, obviously.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And obviously someone like him has, a great deal of expertise, but that's where you look at Peter Laviolette. And, again, he knows how to manage the media. He knows how to manage a team. Look, is he the most sexy hire? No. But he feels like a sure thing. And in sports where nothing is a sure thing, and the Rangers are very much a veteran-based team where you have a lot of guys, and this kind of feels like to me it's Chris Drury's last stand. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like he had to get the coaching decision right. It's a little bit of a safer call. So again, like I don't blame him. Peter Laviolette, he has had a bit of underwhelming last couple stints and whatnot. But look, he's been in Philadelphia, he's been in Washington, he's been all around the league. This feels like a guy that when it comes to a New York Ranger hiring, this feels right. You know what I'm saying? Where this feels like after so many weeks of speculation, who's it going to be, whatnot. At the end of the day, it was always going to be Peter Laviolette. And so maybe I came to terms with it a few weeks ago, just realizing that this is where we're going down. And it's not, the big time hire, but I think this is what is best for the Rangers right now. And look, we'll probably have a couple years of him, and we'll see if he's able to take the Rangers to the playoffs. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what the Rangers have been needing. They need someone that can guide them, get them to the Stanley Cup Finals. And if they're able to do that, that's where you got to harp on your players and hope that they're the ones that'll be able to guide you and take it home from there. So, not a sexy pick, but you know what? It's probably best for the Rangers right now.
All right. It's been a while, but it's good to check back in with our Hall of Famer, Larry Brooks. Follow him on Twitter at NYP_Brooksy. Larry, Peter Laviolette, your thoughts?
The Rangers hired a competent coach. He's a competent NHL coach. Bottom line, they hired
competent. Leave it at that.
He's competent. Listen, he can. I think he will be able to get players' attention, and I think that because of the force of his personality. I think because he comes in with some weight behind him, having won a Stanley Cup, having taken two other teams to the final, having achieved a fair measure of success. He's the winningest American coach in NHL history. He's the 8th winningest coach in NHL history. So again, I was not damning him with faint praise when I said he's confident. I wasn't. That's the bottom line. He's a competent coach, and you don't know whether Chris Knobloch is going to be a competent NHL coach when you assign him the task of winning the Stanley Cup in his first season.
Right.
And that's what Peter Laviolette is here to do. That's what the coaching search was about. It wasn't about finding a long-term match. It wasn't about finding. I think they would have loved to have found their own John Cooper. We talked about this. It seems like months ago, but it was only 5 weeks ago. That every team wants to find its own John Cooper. Every team wants to have a young coach come up through their system and then be a franchise coach the way players are franchise players. And I think the Rangers were open to that, but I just don't think they thought they found one. And I do think also, even you look back when John Cooper was hired, they were a good team in Tampa. They had good players, but I don't think there was a mandate for Tampa Bay to win in his first year. There's a mandate for the Rangers to win, whether that's realistic or not. That's the mandate. That's the expectation here. There's really not very much wiggle room here. What's going to be a successful season for the Rangers? Making the playoffs? Well, you have to start there, but winning a round, winning 2 rounds, what's going to be measured as success here?
Mhm.
And so it's not about it's not about hiring a development coach. It's not about giving a young guy a shot. It's about hiring a guy who's going to get through to what's obviously a difficult team to coach. This is now the third coach in 4 years. They've chewed through two polar opposites. They've chewed, David Quinn and Gerard Gallant. They're polar opposites in the way they approach coaching. So they've gone through so this is a tough team to coach. They're a veteran group. They've got some kids, we know that, younger guys basically on the back end. Just about everybody other than Hedel, Lafreniere, and Kako were 28 years old or older on their forwards. So it's a veteran team. They have a lot of no move contracts. So you can't threaten a guy. Well, we're going to move you if you don't play well. So I think they need a commanding voice in that room, and Peter Laviolette is a commanding voice. So listen, is it the most exciting hire? No one wants the recycle. No one really loves the recyclables. But as I pointed out a number of times, I'm sure I'm not the only one. Bruce Cassidy won the Stanley Cup. He's on his third team, right? Paul Maurice, finals, 5th tour of duty, 2 with Carolina. Pete DeBoer, conference finalist, 5 teams. And so it is, the Rangers aren't an exception here. They're looking for someone with experience who has coached different kinds of teams, different kind of players. And honestly, I think, of course, they're going to have to make the playoffs, and it's going to be a battle. We know that. But assuming the team makes the playoffs, and that's a dangerous assumption, but let's just lay it out. Okay, they make the playoffs. That's only the first step. He's going to be judged on what they do after they make the playoffs. The Rangers are going to be judged on what they do after they make the playoffs. And so they have an experienced guy back there who has coached different kinds of teams. He coached a veteran team in Carolina. They had a couple of younger guys. Eric Stahl was only 21 when they won the Cup. So, he had some young pieces, but that was a veteran team in Carolina. He had a younger team on the island. He had a very young team in Nashville that he brought along. I mean, Yossi and Forsberg. I mean, those guys were young. They were in their early 20s. Ryan Ellis, they're core of that team. So he can coach young guys. Washington, I just think, is a dysfunctional situation.
Right.
I think the Caps have, just turned their operation over to the goal record chase of Alexander Ovechkin. I don't think they're a serious operation right now.
Yikes.
So I don't judge Laviolette off his time in Washington. Obviously,
neither do the Rangers.
Yeah, right. I'm talking a lot. I should let you talk.
No, please. No,
but,
I mean, to your point about everybody wants to find the next John Cooper, the next Rod Brind'Amour. As soon as they started this coaching search, I just remember thinking that a first-time guy is probably not the answer and shouldn't be the answer, especially if we're looking back at David Quinn's tenure. We saw how that happened, the disconnect between him and the veterans. I understand the argument that, you take the risk, it's a higher reward. You give a guy his first shot, he could be, a franchise coach. Jay Leach, I thought, would have been great for that. All the people that I talked to about him, he came with raving reviews, which I'm sure Drury heard about too. But are you really going to hand the keys over to a guy that has never done it before?
But what's interesting too about that, Molly, and I think people were excited about Jay Leach.
Yeah. I was excited about Jay Leach.
Right. But what my understanding is that Jay Leach didn't think he was ready for
Yeah.
the Rangers as much as the Rangers, excuse me, might not thought he was ready for them. I don't think Jay Leach, and you know, I don't blame him. I don't know him. I don't, so I don't want to speak for him, but it's a tough way to start, you know,
Oh
because
yeah.
you're not guaranteed a second chance.
Right.
And if you come in and get chewed up, so I think it was as much mutual as Jay Leach saying, "Listen, I don't
Yeah.
think this is the right spot for me." So the Rangers say, "You know what? You know, we probably, you know, we agree."
Yeah.
So
Look how
yeah,
long it took for David Quinn to get back into it.
right. And David Quinn had a personal connection, right? Mike Greer.
Right.
So you know, he had that too. So I think all in all, the you know, listen, I think if they had targeted Peter Laviolette, they would have hired him the first day. I think we all know that. You know, he was available; they could have hired him. But as has been reported, you know, widely, they were monitoring the situation with Mike Sullivan. I mean, they were, and people can say, and look, it was always a long shot, but it wasn't necessarily a fantasy, you know,
No.
because you didn't know how it was going to work out with Kyle Dubas going to Pittsburgh, and that had been around for, you know, a while. It was no shock when Kyle Dubas wound up there, and there was the potential, the hypothetical scenario that Mike Sullivan and Kyle Dubas were not going to fit, that they both, you know, they both wanted the same sort of power. Sullivan has been empowered by the
Fenway
ownership
Sports
there
Group,
to make,
yeah.
you know, to become more than just a coach, the way it appears that John Tortorella has been empowered in Philadelphia to have some say. You know, we'll see how that works out. It's you know, I think coaches should have input, but the GM, you know, makes the team, and the coach coaches the roster he's given. That's always been, you know, that's always been an interesting conversation with Tortorella about the roster he's given and the roster he wants, but you know, you don't get to coach.
It's for a different day.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, they have a set of personnel here. They believe that Laviolette can get through to them. Mike Sullivan didn't happen. They wanted to see if Sheldon Keefe would become available for an interview. That didn't happen. And so they went, you know, and so, you know, obviously Laviolette was okay with it. He didn't feel he was being disrespected. You know, there's no hint that Laviolette ever went to Drury and said, listen, if you don't, you know, I mean, you know, I need to know by tomorrow, you know, that would have been an interesting move. But you know, I think there was probably an understanding by them both. John Hines became available, and Drury looked into him. I think there was a stretch where John Hines was you know, was neck and neck, but John Hines doesn't have the record. He just doesn't. I mean, again, I heard how prepared John Hines is, the practices he runs, detail oriented, in-game tactical, you know, adjustments. But I think it was going to be a tougher sell, not necessarily to the fan base, because you can't make trades, you can't hire people off the reaction on social media or how the fan base is going to react, right? I mean, Yankee fans weren't happy when Joe Torre was hired. You know, it's not, you know, and listen, Ranger fans don't seem to like anyone who's coaching their team. They don't. They like the next guy. It's like football fans always want the backup quarterback to play. Oh, we want this guy. We want this guy. It's like Ranger fans always want someone else to coach. Like Vigneault wasn't good enough. They went to the finals and won the President's Trophy. But Vigneault was a horrible coach because he played Jesper Fast in the top six. He was terrible. He didn't play the kids. And then David Quinn, wow, this guy, he can't coach. He's not giving Lafreniere, you know, first line ice time. And Gerard Gallant, oh, he's awful, you know. So I don't think necessarily Hines would have been a tougher sell to the fan base. He would have, but I don't think that was part of it.
No, that's
Would
not
have
the
been a
reason,
tougher
at
sell.
least.
I think it would have been a tougher sell to the team. Just
To the
saying,
room, yes.
you know, what's he done?
Right.
You know, he hasn't won a playoff round, and
Exactly.
even that, it's kind of like you're hiring a coach to win 4 playoff rounds,
And
so now you're
this
going to
guy
hire
hasn't
a
even
coach
won
who-
one.
right? Who has coached in the NHL for 8 years,
Yeah.
and hasn't won one. So you know, I think in the end, it was the resume of Peter Laviolette and get to work. You know, I mean, honestly, I think, you know, the search was kind of interesting because it was stagnant for such a long time. They were just the same names. I mean, you know, you know, Patrick Waugh, you know, popped in, but he was never a consideration.
Quickly shot down.
And immediately shot down. So, you know, you have, again, a competent career NHL coach whose teams have won the 8th most games in history, who has won a Stanley Cup, who has gotten to the finals 2 other times. Is he Toe Blake? Probably not. You know, is he Al Weber? No, he's not. But can he lead the Rangers through the playoffs? Yes, he can.
Yes. I was going to say that I feel like of all the candidates, Peter Laviolette and John Hines were probably the only 2 that could handle the situation in New York, that could handle the win now mandate, this collection of stars. You know, you look at the first time guys, like it was just too much of a daunting task for those. And before you came on, we were talking about Mike Babcock and Joel Quenneville. Why would those guys, with what they just went through, want to come to the spotlight of New York and just have it all be almost relived again? Is what would happen if they came here.
No, I agree. I think you know, I wrote a number of times that Quenneville was not going to be consideration, and he was not. This isn't I told you so, but I just kept hearing from people that even if he is reinstated, that New York probably wasn't the best place for him to come back to, and that no one really thought that. You know, I've been told that Quenneville's, you know, Quenneville. Now, listen, if he had been offered the job, would he have accepted it? You know, who knows?
Yeah.
But I don't think that, you know,
I wonder.
You know, but then again, if the job were still open, we don't know if Bettman would have reinstated him. I mean, you know, it's just all this. It was not the right place for him. You know, a smaller market where he might be able to slide under the radar for a bit, if he can, because, you know, it's a different time now. You know,
right?
You don't just turn the page on this,
right?
So, you know, wherever he goes, there's going to be an issue, but I don't know that New York was the place. And Mike Babcock, I don't think was ever a consideration. I know, you know, Glenn Sather has a long relationship with him. I think an interview was done sort of out of respect for Glenn. And again, you're right. I don't think Babcock had any inclination to return to the NHL here, where his pass would be churned through just about every day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. So here's, I was about to say, by the 2 people sitting here. Here's my next question to you. So when the Rangers first hired Gerard Gallant, you know, same sort of format, which I think is so funny. Toward the end of your initial article, you know, you got into a little bit of the deficiencies that he was known for, you know, not much of an X's and O's guy, which ended up being an issue for him in the long run. Curious what you've heard about Laviolette, where his weak points might be, your thoughts on that.
I think, you know, he can be an emotional guy. I think one of his weak points is that he kind of wears on you after he's there for a while. I think it just becomes a little bit much.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be the issue here, because again, he's really being brought in as a gunslinger,
right? For that last
just to take care of this job.
Yeah.
Just take care of this job. So I think, his first year he's been wildly successful. His first year everywhere, even in Washington, they had a good first year. They got bounced out of the playoffs in the first round. It was after the 56 game season, right? So it was a little,
weird.
It was a little bit strange. But Washington had a good year too under him. But everywhere else, and again, if you separate Washington, everywhere else he's been his teams have improved markedly in the first year. So I think that's what you look for, and teams generally seek to fill in the blanks from the predecessor. I mean, you go the other way. You don't hire a carbon copy of the guy who just let go. So where David Quinn's deficiencies maybe were in his relationships with the players, because he was because he's a guy who wants to have relationships with all his players. That's the way he operated in college. That's the way he was successful in college, and so he always seemed to be in the players' businesses. He was always seemed to be looking over their shoulders, and I think it was entirely benevolent. I think David Quinn was thinking like, hey, how can I help you? How can I help you? What are you thinking? What can we do? But these are pros, and they don't want that. They don't want that.
And then Gallant was the polar opposite.
Right,
was actually
exactly. Gallant was the polar opposite. Just go play. Just go play.
And didn't speak to any of them before the first day of training camp.
Right. He didn't want to meet them. He doesn't talk to them. He called Adam Fox, right? Because he won the Knights, right?
Yeah. That was it. That was it.
Right. So, but it was basically, and then when you talk to guys, his first year, they loved that. They loved it. Oh, we just come to the rink, just show up, do what we do. Job. He trusts. But there were holes. The players in the end thought that they weren't getting enough help.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that they weren't being coached well enough. Listen, I don't think there's anyone had an issue with Gallant as an individual. He treated players the way, and we talked about this through the 2 years. He treated players the way he wanted to be treated as a player. He was very, very respectful. Now, listen, I'm sure there were squabbles behind closed doors, and we know the relationship with Lafreniere was a little bit wonky. How many times did we write that he talked about Lafreniere a little bit differently than he talked about any other player. He wouldn't hesitate to jab Lafreniere, where he
never did it to anybody else.
And then when he did,
he'd get mad at us.
Misinterpreted. It was just a very strange relationship. But again, I think Gallant is a very popular person. He's a good guy, and obviously he can coach too. 110 points and 107 points.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. You can't argue with that. I think what I'm most excited about Laviolette in terms of how he's going to fit well with this team. You had an awesome column on Patrick Waugh and what he could bring, and that's the emotion and the passion and the fire, which we wrote about it this past season about how they don't really have a player like that in the locker room. Right. Jacob Trouba is a lead by example kind of player. The helmet toss was an out of character, spur of the moment, organic thing that happened that was not calculated and in any way, shape, or form, because that's just not how they roll. I love that video of Laviolette that's been circulating since the hire, of him ripping the room. I want you to rip your heart out of your chest and put it on the ice in this period, probably for a regular season game. And I think that's some, I remember one time during the regular season, I think it was Adam Fox said that Gerard Gallant came to the room and said, "We're not losing this game," which Gallant didn't do that a lot, but they respond.
Right.
We've seen that they can respond to that kind of emotion and passion. So I think that Laviolette has that. And I think that will be a very welcome change in the locker room.
I do too, but I also think that it's interesting because he also fills in the blanks where he is, and I don't want to denigrate Gallant, but
no, we're not. We're not.
Laviolette is more tactically proficient, I think. He believes in matching lines. I mean, that's not an exception. Gallant really was the exception, and really not, not really paying much attention at all to matching lines. And again, we talked about, how strengths are weaknesses in all of us, right? And our strengths are our weaknesses. And his strength was to empower players by saying, just go out and play. Go out and play. I'm not looking over your shoulder. Go out and play. But at this point, and especially when you get into the playoffs, you're facing opposition that is honing in on every weakness you have, game after game. You have to put players in their best position to succeed, and just and this is simplistic. I'm sure Gallant just didn't say, go out and play.
Of course
do
not.
what you want. I mean, he didn't do that.
Of course.
But the players felt, and again, as I wrote after the hire, it's going to be on the players now, because they've gone through these two coaches,
and they got the guy that they wanted.
Right. And so, but the players, I think, like Mika Zibanejad needed help. Artemi Panarin needed help. And, not to, we're talking 2 years ago when they went to the conference finals, even not to try and move Zibanejad away from the Jordan Staal match against Carolina. You have to coach these guys. You have to give them, you have to put them in a better position to succeed. And I think that's what Laviolette will do. I think he brings structure. There wasn't a lot of structure. And again, it sounds like we're just bashing, Gallant, bashing this team that had the fifth best record in the league over the last 2 years, 217 points, the fifth best. They did win 13 playoff games over the 2 years, only 3 this year. But there was a disconnect at the end. There just was. If you don't not show up for 3 of the final 4 games of a best of 7 series, and
I feel like we're reliving it
and just move on. So so I think that Laviolette does bring that emotion, and but I also think he brings the tactical expertise, where he will be able to put the Rangers in a better position to win. Now, again, it's going to be a challenge. I don't know how the Rangers construct a checking line, and I've talked about this forever. You need a shutdown line to win in the NHL. You may not need one to rack up 110 points or 105 points. You need a shutdown line to win in the playoffs. You need a matchup line to succeed in the playoffs. I look at this Ranger personnel. I don't see where it's coming from. So this is going to be a challenge. And again, burden on Laviolette, burden on the players, burden on Chris Drury, to give Laviolette players who can fill roles that the Rangers need to fill. And with a cap situation, I cannot figure out. I mean, black and white, it's right there. But tough. I see, whatever it is, 11 point, and I don't have it off the top of my head. It's 11.5, 11.7 to fill 8 spots. And 2 of them are K'Andre Miller and Alexis Lafreniere. So I don't even know how the math is going to work. I have no idea. Obviously, it's going to be a very challenging summer for Drury, because he not only has to fit guys into the cap, he has to improve the team. And he has to make the team harder to play against. Again, going back to 2 years, that was their objective 2 years ago. So they traded for and signed Barclay Goodrow. They traded for Ryan Reeves. They brought in Dryden Hunt. There was another player. They brought in Patrick Nemeth, who they they was going to be
Patrick.
a big body, big body back there who's going to be
Mhm.
useful. And all of these guys are gone
Yeah.
except for Goodrow. So they
Yep.
have to replenish that with no money. And and
You're painting a
with-
pretty bleak picture here, Larry.
Welcome to New York.
Yeah.
Welcome to New York, Lobby.
We're supposed to be banging the drums on this hire, and you're like,
No.
I don't see how this is gonna work.
No, but I he's got to construct a checking line. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but that's kind of his job, not ours.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that, thank God.
Well, it seems like the easy part is done, and now the tough part, like you said, begins.
Yep.
As we said in high school, Larry Hags, have a good summer, and we'll talk to the next big signing, although there might not be
All right.
many.
Sounds
this
good.
summer.
See you guys.
All righty, Larry painting that picture as bleak as possible. It is not the Mona Lisa. It is a bleak picture, and I say big signings. Who knows if they will be able to do anything? There might be a lot of small ones. And if so, we might not see you for another 3 months here and up in the blue seats. As that wraps up episode 126. Thanks to Andrew Harts for helping me in producing and joining the show. And thanks to Larry Brooks for joining us all season long. Mollie, what do you think of the Vegas Golden Knights? Stanley Cup. I mean, we didn't even mention that. It was like, a team just wins the championship last night and we do a podcast, doesn't come up. But what do you think? First title.
Listen, we're a Rangers podcast. We got to start with the Rangers news. But yes, congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights and their fans who have been waiting 6 long years for it to happen. No, it's absolutely epic. I mean, did you see them partying at, I think it was Omnia, which I've been there before, might I add, with Steve Aoki just DJing the after party of the Stanley Cup. The parade is going to be electric. I mean, everybody that's pissed off about the Golden Knights winning, look, I get their cap situation and the expansion draft, and they had Jonathan Marchessault, their Conn Smythe winner, handed to them on a silver platter. I get the frustration, but it's great for the game. It's great for the league. It's great for the city of Vegas. I'm very excited. I thought it was a great series. You got to tip your cap to the Florida Panthers. They had an unbelievable run. Matthew Tkachuk playing with a broken sternum in Game 4. I mean, what's better than hockey? Am I right? So I think it was a great Stanley Cup final, and I'm excited to see what happens next year now.
Yeah, Vegas championship is pretty sick. My buddy Kaylee does their social media. This was her first year, and she got to win a championship, which is just an insane start to the job. And the cup literally at the club. It's Steve Aoki throwing cakes at people. Like
I love it.
I mean, cakes being thrown at people, cups at a club in Las Vegas. I mean, that's what life is all about, right? Like for most people. So congrats to the Golden Knights. 1 in 5 years, as the Rangers have had one in 60 years now.
No, we're not going to talk about it.
Well, hopefully that changes with Peter Laviolette as head coach. I'm sure Rangers fans are groaning and moaning right now, but give it a shot. And the guy has a good track record in the past. All right, Mollie, we'll talk to you at some point in this generation over the summer. We'll see what happens. Make sure you catch up on all old episodes by subscribing to the New York Post Sports YouTube page. Give us a thumbs up there. Comment below. What'd you think of the Laviolette hire? Do you like it? Do you don't? Why not? Let us know in the comments section. Follow Mollie on Twitter at Mollie Walker. That's 2 E's, 2 R's. Follow me at Jake Brown Radio. And of course, subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Amazon. Catch up on all old episodes. And we'll see you sometime later this summer. Everyone stay safe. And thanks for listening to Up in the Blue Seats. Ta-ta.